the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Friday, October 10th, and this is week 7 of the 2025 college football season, and this is a big rivalry week. This is the Auburn week of the Auburn game. So we're just one day away from Georgia heading over to, well, they're probably already heading over today, but just one day away from Georgia playing Auburn on the plains, as they like to say it over in Auburn, the loveliest village on the plains. I think they have confused themselves with Oklahoma or someplace else. But Georgia will be taking on Auburn on Saturday night at 7:30 at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And this is a big rivalry week. So this is also a game right now that's listed as a fairly close game. Vegas has this as a 3.5-point spread. It's kind of held steady at that all week. And we're going to talk a little bit more about specifics of the game and break that down in a little while, or maybe even in a separate podcast. We may do this in 1 and 2 parts. But first, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about rivalries. This is a great chance to talk about rivalries. I have talked about our rivalry with Tennessee in earlier podcasts leading up to the Tennessee game. Obviously, I talked a little bit about the nature of the Alabama rivalry, and maybe it hasn't historically been such a big rival, or one that Georgia fans would have, or Alabama fans would have long time said this is one of our top rivals. Certainly become something more so lately. Tennessee, again, not a deep history there until 1992 when the conference split into 2 halves, but when they beat us 9 in a row, it became kind of important to do payback, and we've now more or less completed that payback. We've taken control of that series. We've now beaten them 9 in a row, and we get a year off as they won't be on our schedule next year. But Auburn is one of the 3 teams that's going to be one of our annual opponents, as it's called, not permanent opponents. The SEC reserves the right to change this whole plan after the 4 years that they've laid out, the next 4 years. But everybody has wanted to see the Auburn-Georgia series continue. You've probably, if you've looked around and been getting excited and reared up for the game by reviewing both this site, this podcast, Daily Dawg, and others, you've probably seen a lot of people digging into history a little bit more this week. And it's hard not to. This is one of the great historical rivalries in all of college football. This will be the 130th meeting between Georgia and Auburn, which makes it one of the oldest rivalries in college football. Goes by the name of the Deep South's oldest rivalry, which I don't think is a very catchy name, but it is descriptive, I guess. You have the cocktail party for the world's largest outdoor cocktail party for the Georgia-Florida game. You have clean old-fashioned hate for the Georgia-Georgia Tech game. So this one just goes by the Deep South's oldest rivalry. And they have been playing, Georgia and Auburn have been playing since the late 1800s. So 129 games so far. So this is a rivalry that means a lot to me, and I think, like I said, this is a great chance to talk about rivalries and why they matter. And I think it fits in the context, and I'm as guilty as anybody throughout so far this season. I have been talking about, hey, how is our team stacking up? What are we looking at this year for the SEC championship and the playoff? How are we going to measure up against these other playoff teams? Our feelings and excitement about the team right now are all kind of in a little bit of flux because we started the season with high expectations, ranked in the top 5. Then we managed to go on the road and beat Tennessee in a hostile environment, an exciting game. It exposed some concerns about the defense. But overall, there's still a lot of enthusiasm. Then we get a week off and we think we finally have Alabama, and we lose to Alabama. And now there's a lot more consternation about the weak spots of the team. And I've been talking all season about the idea there are no just juggernaut great teams out there, these killer teams. That we may have to review that a little bit. I mean, a couple teams are starting to emerge, and I think they have separated themselves from us. I think we're still among those top 10 teams, and I think we're probably fairly ranked at 10. I'd be okay with us being anywhere between 7 and 10. I don't think outside the top 10 makes sense, but so we come into this game, though, and our focus and this season has been on championships, and reasonably so. That's what happens when the expectations get so high. And I've talked about that this season, that we should just enjoy a little bit of the excitement of the unknown. Early in the season, that was one of the things I was trying to get us to think about a little bit. Like, hey, we don't know for sure. We went for such a long time where you looked at a game like this, like a rivalry game against Auburn, but where we were clearly the more talented team, the better team, and we should win, and we did, and most of the time go out and win fairly emphatically against Auburn over the last few years. We famously had the really close game the last time we were at the Plains, and it's sort of well regarded that, maybe without Brock Bowers, we don't pull that one out because Brock Bowers went off and had a great game. But Brock Bowers had a lot of great games. That's how he got to be a multi-time All-American. And he's continuing to have great games in the NFL. So this game, though, gives us a chance to take a step back and maybe remember a different time. And I've been sharing with you my history, my starting in college at Georgia as a freshman in 1989. And so I tend to reflect on this modern history of Georgia football. And of course, I love the whole history. I'm a history buff. I was a history major at Georgia. So we've talked about that. I'm prone to bring you the history, and I'm going to bring you more history today. And I think it's great. And look, we have a rich and deep history as a program, as a team, as a school. The university does, the football program does, and it's something to revel in. It's something to take a lot of pride and passion in. And I enjoy that. And it's one of the things, the Auburn rivalry is where I think I really started in my freshman year to dig into the history. And I'm going to explain that a little bit now. So as I grew up, I was a sports fan from a young kid. I was a diehard or a glutton for punishment, I guess, because I started at 5 years old as a Braves fan, and it would be a long time before that got paid off with anything good. I'll admit I was never a deep Falcons fan, but I've always watched and followed the Falcons, been to a number of Falcons games, and wanted to be a big Falcons supporter. My family came from South Florida. My dad was a big Miami Dolphins fan, and so actually the first sports paraphernalia I had as a kid, there's pictures of little me, 4 or 5 years old, wearing a Miami Dolphins jersey and helmet, and I'm pretty sure it was a Bob Greasy jersey, but reflecting of the 1970s Dolphins team, that undefeated team from the 1970s. So although I wasn't as big a Greasy fan, my favorite player from that era was Larry Zonka. I always wanted to be a running back if I was going to play football. I loved running backs. I just liked watching these guys just bust through tackles and gain the tough yards and once in a while break free and have the home run touchdown. Just loved running backs. So that worked great for me as I became a Georgia fan, a school often referred to as running back U. I mean, obviously, when you think of Herschel Walker, but there's a string of other great running backs. Modern era, when I was in college, we had Garrison Hurst. When I first got to college, it was Rodney Hampton, who would go to the pros and have a nice career with the Giants. Number of guys people might remember like Lars Tate and Tim Worley. Just a legacy of great running backs at Georgia. And so, that's another part of our history. And of course, this is an interesting parallel with Auburn. We had the championship years, the national championship, SEC champion years of 1980, 81, 82 with Herschel Walker. And then Auburn pretty much turns around and almost matches if not matches the hype with Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson, starting 83, 84, 85. Auburn starts winning SEC championships and in the mix for the national title behind their great running back, Bo Jackson, who also, a phenomenal player, an amazing college football player. So there's all these interesting parallels. But so again, for me, I grew up in Metro Atlanta. I grew up a sports fan, and as I was getting ready to head to college, one of the people in my life that emerged as my best friend also emerged as my best sports friend. This was the guy that I not only I spent a lot of time with, but we both played sports together, and we talked sports all the time. So we went water skiing, we played golf, we played tennis, we did mountain biking later. I think that was really more of a college and beyond thing. I don't think we did that in high school. But we were playing sports together, and we even organized a annual around the holidays, the Christmas, Thanksgiving holidays, a full field 11-on-11 or as many as we could get or as close as we could get to 11 on 11, tackle football game starting in high school and college. I mean, we were just, we're sports nuts, and we enjoyed talking sports, and we could just break down and talk sports forever. And so this buddy of mine, we're the same age, same year in school. And so when it comes time to pick colleges, for reasons never conceived, that I've never been able to conceive or understand, he gets it in his mind that he's going to go to Auburn. And of course, I'm disappointed because obviously we have a state school right here, and he's going to spend unnecessary money to go over out of state and go to Auburn, at least for the first year. They used to allow you to transfer your in-state to in-state residency over there in Alabama after 1 year and getting a driver's license. So they'll take anybody. So, or they would back then. I don't think they do that as much now. So either way, though, for the first year, it's going to have to pay extra money to go to Auburn of all places. And again, this is where I guess I had never really been a part of a sports rivalry, and especially mostly being, as a pro sports fan, mostly. I had not been into college sports, but as a pro sports fan, I guess we did have in the early days the Braves-Dodgers rivalry, of the Western Division, which of course never made any sense that we were in the West, but that was kind of the thing. And you saw some pro rivalries out there. But as you well know, as a college football fan, as Georgia fans, you know that college football, college sports brings a passion and an energy like nothing else. And sure, there's fans that never went to the university. Maybe they just live in the state, but still they live in the state. And so if you live in the state of Georgia and you want to claim Georgia as your team, well, that makes a lot of sense. And some people look down on that and they say, hey, I'm an alum, and these people just call on. Well, I'll take them. I'm glad to have the fans. They want to cheer my team. I'm happy to have them. Even if they live in Nebraska, they want to cheer the team. They can cheer the team. I'm fine with that. But I think it certainly makes sense when you look at people who live in the state and maybe didn't go to the school, but they live here. Maybe they just moved here, but they start to develop a pride in their home area, and so they become fans. So that's great. But a lot of, obviously, Georgia fans, me included, are alums. And so, again, I paid a lot of money. For me, a lot less money than maybe to go other places since it was in-state, but for me at the time, it was a struggle. Had to work my way through school, and the finances of the whole thing was always a big deal. So, blood, sweat, tears, and money, right, go into being a part of the University of Georgia. And I earned that right. I worked hard to be an alum and get into school, and so I'm proud to have that degree. I'm proud to be a Georgia Bulldog. I'd be proud to be a Georgia Bulldog even if we had a crappy Division II team, a small school, and we weren't a big national power. But instead we are. We're a national elite college football blue blood, as they like to say. And we have a rich and deep history, about as rich and deep as anybody. We're not the best team of all time. And I kind of keep talking about that. And I think in the off season, we'll spend more time talking about who is it that rates the programs the best of all time and how do they do it. I've alluded to different factors and ideas, and I'm sure you've looked at them before too. I'm sure you have some pride in it. I would say that we're clearly one of the top 10 teams of all time. And I think the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen that status elevate. I've mentioned that before. We're probably more like somewhere in the 12 to 15 range or 10 to 15 range. And so again, when I first started in school and my buddy heads off to Auburn and I go to Georgia, all of a sudden I get introduced into this rivalry in a new way I never had before. Because, okay, maybe the Braves were rivals with the Dodgers, and it was always like, oh, yay, we beat the Dodgers. And it was really exciting, since we were rivals with the Dodgers back in 1991, that it was the Dodgers that we overtook after falling 9.5 games behind them during the season in our division. And then we overtake them, win the division, and, end up going on to the World Series that year. So that was super exciting, right? But I didn't personally know anybody from LA. I don't have any real connection to anybody in Los Angeles to sort of razz them about. And I thought about this a lot, like, why is that important? But that becomes a big part of the whole rivalry thing, and it's kind of one of the fun things about sports. It's really not appropriate in regular life to be like, hey, I'm a lot smarter than you. Hey, I'm a lot better looking than you. Hey, how much money are you making? Gosh, I make more money than you. These are inappropriate ways to behave, right? But we can get behind like, hey, I went to the University of Georgia. You, for reasons unknown, went to Auburn, and guess what? My school's better than yours. You guys suck. We're great. This is this is an acceptable way in American culture to be able to get into it with your friends and family. And that's the thing, right? Rivalries mean the most when they are connected to friends and family. And so, yeah, and that's one of the reasons the Auburn-Alabama rivalry is such a big deal, right? It's an in-state, in-family fight. I mean, a lot of the people, I mean, Alabama's changing and it's growing like Georgia. There's more people coming into Alabama from out of the state, but it hasn't seen the kind of growth that Georgia has, and it still has a predominant number of people who live in Alabama, or people who've always lived in Alabama, and their family have been there for a long time. So there's a lot of this taking sides, and again, not everybody went to these schools. Not everybody, they weren't necessarily their schools, but almost everybody in Alabama takes sides. You're either Auburn or Alabama, right? So, and inside of the state of Alabama, with all these different taking sides, a lot of that's within families. So here we are. Georgia has a lot of rivals, and it's one of the things that's really exciting about being a Georgia Bulldog, I think, is that we have so many rivals. We border so many states. We border Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama. So we've got a lot of options because border rivals always seem exciting. Plus, you always have the in-state rival. So we're a big enough state. We have multiple football teams in the state of Georgia now. We didn't used to so much, but we do now. We have, and there has historically, from as long back as anybody could care or remember in the history of college football, Georgia and Georgia Tech are both among the great teams of all time. Georgia Tech, of course, has spent a lot of its last 30, 40 years or more, maybe 50 years, kind of occasionally spiking to a high level, but mostly being kind of mid, right? And so that's brought down their status. But they're still, if you look at their accomplishments, they have 4 national titles to their credit. They are in the top 25 of all time wins. There's got a lot of great history there. So they're one of the top 25 historical programs of all time. And so Georgia, a lot higher. And a lot of that has to do with how Georgia has done in this last 40 or 50 years. And separating themselves from Georgia Tech. But then we have that rivalry, and it's a big deal. It's not considered a friendly, if I could talk, rivalry. That's why it's called clean old-fashioned hate. So, but Auburn is like cousins. Georgia and Auburn are like cousins, and there's been so much family connection. There's this history there, right? Vince Dooley got a master's degree and an undergraduate degree from Auburn, and comes over to Georgia, and coaches after learning the coaching profession under Shug Jordan over at Auburn. And then Pat Dye, the legendary Auburn coach, he was a Georgia All-American and ends up over in Auburn coaching. And even today, we have Stacy Searles on our staff as our offensive line coach, and he played at Auburn. Auburn and Georgia have shared having at different times Tracy Rocker and Rodney Gardner were also 2 guys who coached offensive, defensive line play for Georgia and Auburn, and both of those guys played at Auburn. So there's a lot of, and Mike Bobo is, of course, played quarterback at Georgia. He coached at Georgia, but he's also coached offensive. He was offensive coordinator at Auburn for a little bit, and so there's just these back and forth connections. So it's like, as a program to program, it's like cousins or family, but again, not the sort of the bad side of the family and the good side of the family like the Auburn-Alabama feud is. It's kind of more respected than that, but then you still want to, get the edge. You still want to have the better of each other. And so for me, I didn't have, nobody in my family had attended the University of Georgia before I did. We moved here when I was a baby. My family was mostly from South Florida. My mother grew up in the Midwest and my father in South Florida. So, my mother started her degree at the University of Missouri and finished at Georgia State here in Atlanta area. And my dad attended schools in Florida. So I didn't, and none of them were big college football fans. They didn't have that kind of connection that I ended up developing at the University of Georgia. And again, I think that's a testimony to the University of Georgia. I didn't go to the University of Georgia and was like, oh, I'm just blah. I came here, I got my degree. I fell in love with the place. I mean, the whole place, not just football. I mean, right now we're talking football, but my kids and friends and people who know you tell me I could give you the whole historical tour of North Campus and tell you 20 facts you probably didn't know, or maybe you did know, but maybe never wanted to know about different buildings on campus and when they were built and how they got. I fall in love with that kind of stuff, and I fell in love with the university. It's a great place, and but this is this unique opportunity. So I have this friend, he goes off to Auburn, and we're really close. We talk sports all the time. And now all of a sudden, for the first time, I'm in a rivalry situation where I get to be like, hey, I have these feelings I've never had before. Like, I need my program to be better than your program. We need to kick your butt. I could directly look at it and say, I think you made a crazy choice. You could have gone in-state to this better, superior, prettier, everything better school, right? Instead, you go over to Auburn. So we've been fighting that battle for nearly 40 years now between us, and we're still friends and we still talk. And with any luck, he'll listen to this podcast and have a big chuckle about it. But it's that's what started to happen. And so this is when I start digging into the history of the Georgia-Auburn rivalry. And it's a really amazing history when I first get to college. I mean, these teams have played at the time I get to the first game, or my first Georgia-Auburn game as a student, 1989, is the 92nd game in the series. So we're still, even way back then, even 37 years ago, we're walking into, or we're getting close to 100 games played between these two teams. So there's a lot of history there. And I've been hearing about, I've mentioned before, growing up in Metro Atlanta, I was a Dawgs fan, kind of tacitly, or sort of, I was one of those people who just lived here and was connecting to, like, okay, well, hey, and especially as bad as it was in Metro Atlanta, as Atlanta sports, it was very compelling to have a team that in 1980 wins the national championship. So there's still a lot of that glow living on, right, as I head off to college in 1989. It's only 9 years removed from the national championship. And I'm really excited about this because I suffered in my high school, being a big football fan. I went to every game, and I didn't run around and, whatever everybody does at the game, but not watch the game. I was the guy I was one of the few high school people who went to the game and sat there and watched the entire game and was vastly excited and interested about it. And I got some great stories about that I want to share with you in a different time. It's not enough time today to do that. But I sat and watched the game, so I didn't run around with all my friends and stuff. I was a little bit of a geek in that regard, and I was suffering because from the time I stepped foot in high school until my senior year, the first 34 games of my high school experience, my high school team goes 0-34. They lose 34 straight games. So here I am, big sports fan, big football fan, and what am I greeted with? High school, the worst football team maybe in the history of the state. It seems like, right? And so. Finally, they win their first game for the homecoming game of my senior year. They actually win the remaining 6 games, go 6-4, and make the playoffs. And it was just like euphoria. So I thought things are on the rise. And here I am, I'm going off to school. And the one great thing I'm really hooked into about this is I'm going to one of the great elite football schools of all time. And they go 9-3 in 1988 season. Okay, that was Vince Dooley's last year. So he's retiring. They go 9-3. They go to the Gator Bowl, and they win the Gator Bowl over Michigan, I think. And so, not a great season, but another really good season. So I'm like, all right, here we go. Well, I get to school, and we're confronted with horrific mediocrity when I get there. Georgia goes, I think, 6. Yeah, we go 6-6 in 1989. The only good thing I can say about that is we did beat Florida, which unfortunately would be like the last time we beat Florida in like 7 years. And then we would go on that horrible, losing 21 out of 25 or whatever it is. When we get to the Florida series, we'll cover that in detail. But you know it, you experienced it, you feel it, you've heard about it. It was terrible. So in this case, here we are. just I'm at school, and so first year we go 6-6. Next year we go 4-7. Finally, things get a little better. This is the beginning of the Ray Goff era. We have a 9-3, and then a 10-2 season, and then things go back to 5-6, 6-4-1, 6-6 again, 6-6 again. I mean, this is just abject mediocrity, right? So in my first 7 seasons, so my entire on-campus experience in the first couple of years I'm out of college, we're averaging like 6.5 wins a game. So this is not the Georgia football that I was excited about. This isn't the Georgia football I signed up for. And of course, nobody was really. The Ray Goff era was a difficult time. And then it goes to Jim Donnan, and then to Mark Richt, and now to Kirby Smart. So things have progressed, and obviously things have gotten a lot better. How does this matter, again, going back to my rivalry? Well, here we go. First year, my buddy goes off to school. We got the rivalry all year. Then it gets down to November, because the Georgia-Auburn game always used to be played in November, second to last game of the year for both teams, usually. And so it gets to be Thanksgiving break. My buddy comes over from Auburn. He's spending the weekend at with me, and then we're going back home. He got a ride over. He has no car, so I got to take him back to his parents' house. And for the holidays, we're going home for the holidays together. So here I am, yay, come on, let's go. Well, of course, we get hammered in the game. We lose 20-3. So the next year, me and my buddies pile up. We go over to Auburn. We spend the whole weekend in Auburn. They try to convince us how wonderful it is to live in a flat, ugly plain out in Auburn, and whatever. We did have a good time. They were nice guys, a lot of good people over there. We had fun when we went there, but nonetheless, so we go over to the game, and this is one of my early away games, I guess. I think I did go to a away game Yeah, I did my freshman year. We'll talk about that another time. So we go over there, and we lose that game 33-10. And I remember that one, we had no offense. Joe Dupree was our quarterback. He had nothing to do but run for his life. And thankfully, he was an excellent athlete, so he could run for his life. And without him, we probably would never have scored. But that season we go 4-7, and it's just terrible. And it culminates near the end by just getting spanked by Auburn. So, and then the next year we go 9-3 as a team, and we make a bowl game, and we're on the rise. We're going to finish in the top 25. So this is great. We're going to the Poulin Weed Eater Outback Bowl that year and beating Arkansas. Woohoo! But we are still going to lose to Auburn. So I start off with a 3-game losing streak to Auburn. So pretty early, I start digging into the history of this thing, because I'm like, well, maybe at least, Georgia is the better historical team. And I dig into it, and I'm finding out, actually, they're pretty even. And the series was pretty even. We were actually down 1 game in the series when we first got there. I say we, my buddy and I, when we both first started school. Georgia was, here, I'll tell you, at the start of that season, we were... the 1989 season, the record between Auburn and Georgia was 42, 43, and 7. So then we go on to lose 3 games in a row, and we'll eventually, in the first 17 years that now I'm part of the Georgia-Auburn rivalry, and I've got my lifelong buddy that we're going back and forth, in these first 17 years, Georgia's going to lose most of these games. So Auburn's going to go 10-6-1 against Georgia during this time frame. So they're going to win 10 out of 17 games, and Georgia's going to fall behind. The series had been super even and close, but now all of a sudden we're falling behind. We're 5 games under 500 in the series. And as a longtime baseball fan and sports fan, this really bugs me, because again, if nothing else, I'd like to be able to say, well, we're equal, or it was this, but again, now we're falling behind in the series. And one of the things I was really proud of as I started to learn the history of Georgia football, I mentioned this leading into the Alabama game. Alabama is one of the only teams at this stage that Georgia has played regularly, like say 10 times or more, and that we have a losing record against. At the time that I started at Georgia, Auburn was one of the teams as well. We were, again, 1 game under 500. That starting that first year, and LSU was another one, and we don't play them very often, but we played them more than 10 times, so they still counted in that series. But those are really, I think, the only SEC teams that we had a sub 500 record of against during that time. So now I'm really disappointed, right? Because these first 3 years, now like I said, in the first 17 years, we fall behind, and we're 5 games under 500. And the way these series usually go, when you look at, and this is how the Georgia-Auburn series, neck and neck for 100 years, right? So I'm sitting here thinking, look, like a baseball team falls 5 games under 500, they get on a winning streak. It probably could take between a minimum of 2 weeks to a month to get from under 500 just back to 500. Because, even if you win two and lose one, 2 out of 3, you win 2 out of 3, just keep winning 2 out of 3, win series, right? In baseball, it's going to take you a good couple weeks to get back to 500. Well, in football world, you might win two and then lose one and win two and lose one and do that for a while again. But think about this. This is in years. You only get one in baseball games. You get 5 to 6 a week, sometimes 7 games in a week. In football, you get one a year. So this is going to take forever to get back. But then after those first 17 years, the next 20 years, Georgia's going to turn it around substantially. Georgia's going to go 17-3 in the next 20 years of games against Auburn. So that changes everything. So we come into the game this year, and you've probably heard this already, but we are 9 games over 500. We have now taken that series from being upside down and very close to even, and it was even as recently as the 2015 season. We got it back to even. We were even in 2013, then we lost, then we won again. So 2015, we're back to even. But we're on an 8-game winning streak coming into this game, and we're 9 games over 500 in the series overall. We're 65, 56, and 8 in the all-time series, the 129 games that have been played so far. And so that I'm excited about. So this gives me a chance to be, and just going back to the reflection here, the whole point is to say, I have this good friend, and this is the person I talk sports with the most, and this is a lifelong friend. And this is when I really learned the value of the college rivalry. I mean, yes, I'd already invested in the college experience that I went to Georgia, and it's my school. And so I'm all in. Yes, I'm a Braves fan. I've been a Braves fan since I was 5 years old, but I've never been a part of the Braves organization, right? Even if I was a big-time Falcons fan, I've never been a part of the Falcons organization. Well, I was a part of the University of Georgia. I have a degree from the University of Georgia. My kids go to the University of Georgia. I live not down the street, but I live within, 70 miles of the University of Georgia. I get to go to Athens all the time and just still appreciate how wonderful a place it is and say, wow, I love it here. And, lots of Georgia fans do. So it's easy to have that appreciation, but the reflection of the rivalry is when you can really rub it in the face of your friends and your family, because these are the people you're going to talk to all year. So it's great. I mean, yes, I feel a certain, sense of, I love that we were able to beat Ohio State a couple of years ago in that epic game, in the playoff, and then go on to win the national championship. But again, I don't really know anybody from Ohio State. And actually, I do have a niece that's going to graduate school in Ohio State. But it's not like she's just adopted a huge football, fandom of just, stepping on campus as a graduate student. So, I'm not sure she's a huge football fan to begin with anyway. Anyway, I digress. The point is when you see these people, when you talk to these people all the time in your life, then this is the one cultural place where it's acceptable for us to just rib people and try to stick it in their face. Hey, I'm better than you. I beat you. So, for 8 years in a row now, and 17 of the last 20, we've been able to stick that in the face of Auburn fans. And actually, that's getting to be it's actually, in many ways, people think this rivalry has lost a lot of its luster because of that, because Auburn hasn't upheld its end of the bargain. But for me, I don't think it matters that much. It's always going to be a matter of being able to reflect on that personal relationship. And the reason I bring all this up is to say, look, in contrast to where we've been lately, and as exciting as it is to win SEC and national championships and compete for those, and I'm not saying I don't care about that. When we first started, those years of mediocrity I was describing, where we averaged going basically 6-6, a lot of the first 7 to 10 years, I was a Georgia student and then fan, post, graduate, not graduate student, but a graduate of the university and continuing on as an alum fan. During that time frame, yes, I was hoping for an SEC championship. When we went 10-2 in the what was it? It was the 1992 season, right? And Garrison Hurst came in third in the Heisman Trophy balloting. I mean, this was exciting. So I mean, I'm rooting for Heisman Trophy. I was rooting for us to win the SEC. I was rooting for us to have a chance in the national championship. And I've reflected on that season earlier. We missed out because we lost the Tennessee game and we lost the Florida game. And had we won either one of those, we might have been in contention. Or at least a team that was being talked about at a more elite status. We finished the season ranked 8th, and it was a nice season, but we didn't really hit that upper elite echelon, right? That's kind of a place where we got stuck for a long time. Oh, nice team. Good job. You're 5th, 7th, 8th. You won 10 games. You get to go to a January 1st bowl game, but we're not going to talk about you in the national championship breath. And obviously, you might remember we didn't win an SEC championship for a while. We are the second best SEC championship team of all time. Alabama just dominates that category, like we talked about. But Georgia's the second best. We have the second most SEC championships of all time. But we went 20 years in between SEC championships. And so that was a rough go, and a lot of that is that time that I stepped into, because obviously we had won SEC championships in the 1980 season, and I think again in 81 or 82 we were in the Sugar Bowl each of those years, I think, or at least 82 for sure. So I think it was 82 was our last SEC championship until the 2002 season. So it's 20 years go by before we're able to win another SEC championship. So so a lot of that encompasses my, I started in 89. I'd been a casual fan before that, but now I'm a rabid fan starting at 89. And it's, 2002 before I get to even sniff the idea of actually winning a championship. That's, 13, 14 seasons that I'd been on campus. And so what was I fixed on? Well, I was learning the history of Georgia football, and I really became enamored with the idea that we had all these rivalries. I think I've mentioned this before, but first thing I noticed was people walking around on campus. They used to sell these shirts, and you see them all the time, the I Hate Orange shirts, kind of highlighting how we had all these rivals from nearby places, and a lot of them were ugly, crappy orange, right? Like Auburn, has orange and blue, and Florida with orange, and Tennessee with their road crew orange, and Clemson with their just orange. And so you had the High 8 orange shirt that had all these logos of all these other teams that we've been rivals with. And we do have all these rivalries. So that's one of the great things that I thought was really fun about being a Georgia and college football in general. And as a Georgia fan, it was great that we have all these rivals, because there was something you could at least hang on to and look at. Every season isn't going to be a championship season. And that's still true, even in this era. Even Nick Saban won 6 national championships out of 17 seasons. Well, that's amazing, but that's 11 seasons. I mean, almost twice as many seasons that he coached, they didn't win the national championship as they did. I mean, nobody's ever won 6 in 17 years. Alabama fans are incredibly spoiled in that regard, and that's amazing, right? But again, you can't get used to thinking that standard. And we've already talked a bunch about why we think that may never happen again. I don't want to be too deep in that, because I do think at some point maybe people will start to figure out how there's always this arms race that builds in sports where people are constantly working and applying their efforts to figuring out how to master the system. Right now, the system is beating college football. The dominant teams aren't out there. People can't stockpile the talent the way they used to, and every team seems to have some flaws or holes in it, but some more than others maybe. But and we're still trying to figure that out about Georgia. How big are our holes? Can we overcome them? They're bigger than we're used to seeing, but again, how does that compare to the other teams? Because all the other teams out there that are vying to get to the playoffs also have holes. At this point, just as a quick aside, Ohio State looks probably like they deserve to be number one. They're probably the most complete team out there. They're playing unbelievable defense, at least statistically. I haven't been able to see a lot of their games. I watched the Texas-Ohio State game, first game of the year, and they didn't impress me in that game. Both teams looked bad offensively, and I was not convinced that we were watching great defense as much as we were watching bad offense. And I think Texas is showing that that's true. They just don't have a very good offense. And honestly, Ohio State has opened it up some recently. They beat the snot out of Minnesota last week, put 42 points up. They beat Washington on the road 2 weeks ago, but they still only scored 24 points. But you might say, hey, that's good for a tough road environment. They managed to only win the Texas game, the first game of the year, 14-7, so 14 points. They only won by one score, and that's not aging well because doesn't look like a great team, and so they are probably getting better. Their five-star quarterback, who's a first-year player, not a fresh. I don't remember if he's a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, but either way, Justin Sayin, I mean, he is coming into his own and he's playing better. And just like us, they're going to improve and they're going to get better as the season goes on, and their guys get more experience because they lost a lot of guys. But they seem to be able to answer more questions than we are right now. They're playing killer defense. Their offense is doing more than enough. They do have some star players that you can imagine excelling on both sides of the ball, and so they're probably the number one team, and they're probably ahead of us right now because we definitely see some places where I think we feel better about our offense than we did coming into the season, where we're unsure. I think we feel better about Gunnar Stockton than we did. I mean, this is a man who's getting it done. It may not be flashy. He may not be wowing you and is, creating Heisman buzz with 500-yard a game performances, but he's, like we talked about coming on the Kentucky game, I mean, he's cranking out 250 yards a game and 3 touchdowns on average, a couple on the ground, combination of ground and passing. So he's moving the offense. The offense is moving well, not at its peak level. And we'll talk about that also coming up at another time. But offense is moving well. So I think the aside there is just wandering into the where we are right now, but getting back to the Auburn rivalry and how it's been important. You get the idea that it's became important to me, and this is where I really learned the value of rivalry. I appreciated all of our rivals, like the I Hate Orange shirt, but again, I didn't have as much personal connection as much as I love seeing us beat Florida, and I truly hate Florida. I still have very few people that I would actually rub that in the face of or know and say, aha, Florida fans. Same thing with Clemson, same thing with Tennessee. I mean, there's a few. I've gotten to know people in all those places over the years, and but nothing is as important to me as the Auburn rivalry. And I think we've lost sight of a little bit, and I just encourage us in this week of this big rivalry game to remember that this is not ho-hum. This is Auburn. They are a huge rival, and this is been something that's been true for over 100 and something years of Georgia football and Auburn football. And so, yes, we have been on a heater compared to Auburn, especially, right? We have sort of taken over that series, and it hasn't felt super competitive. This game, as we come to it, this goes back to where I was going and saying, look, we seem a little bit more flawed right now. This is a team that, Auburn, I think the Auburn perspective on this game would be the same thing that we said about the Alabama perspective for Georgia coming into the Alabama game. Look, Alabama looks more gettable, as people would say, this year. Georgia had Alabama at home. Georgia seemed to have the upper hand. In fact, we talked about this was the fourth out of the last 5 games or whatever, we were favored in the game against Alabama, and we didn't get it done. Well, Auburn is not favored in this game. They're a 3.5-point underdog at home to Georgia, but that's the least underdog they've probably been in the last 4 or 5 games. And so they have impressed some people in saying, hey, they look pretty good. I mean, they played Oklahoma and Texas A&M, who could end up being 2 of the better teams in the conference this year. They played both of them on the road, super tough, and lost each game, I think, by just a score. And one of those games, I forget now whether it was the Oklahoma or Texas A&M. I think it was the Oklahoma one, but there's a controversy, that a play should have been there should have been a penalty on a play that was a little bit of a cheat. Where the wide receiver faked that they were going out of bounds, and then simulated going out of bounds, and then took off down the sideline and caught the pass that I think was the game-winning touchdown ultimately. So that play should have been disallowed, and Auburn feels a little hard done by that. And had that play been called the penalty that it should have been, then maybe Auburn is not just 3-2, but they're 4-2, and people are saying, hey, they beat a high-quality team. So, but this is this is one of the great things about college football, like I said, is you don't have to just lock in, which is really all you have in the pros. Did we make the playoffs? Did we win a championship? Did we win our division? Did we win the conference? Did we win the world championship, whatever that is, whichever sport you're watching? College football offers you the chance, and Georgia football especially, because of all those rivals I've just mentioned that we have, gives you the chance to at least look at the year and say, look, in a 10-2 year, and this was the best I got for a lot of the early years of my fandom of Georgia football, right? Was, hey, we went 10-2, we went to a January bowl, and we went 4-1 against our biggest rivals that were on our schedule this year. Something like that. Or, hey, we beat Auburn. We only won 1 out of 4 games against our top rivals. I mean, who are our top rivals? You got Florida. In the last 20 years, it's Florida, Tennessee, Auburn. Georgia Tech is always, again, same thing as the Auburn series. Worse, actually, because Georgia Tech series has been pretty lopsided for a long time. I mean, the record is not really even that close. We have probably like a 30-game lead in that series or something. But I mentioned this before. Tech fans, this is another one of those where I've learned, and I do have some friends that went to Tech, not as close and not people I talk sports with as much as the buddy I'm talking about. But I have some Tech people in my life, but just there are Tech people here in Atlanta. So this is where territory matters, right? And I've said this many a time. Tech fans are the worst, or historically they have been, in my opinion, because they will not own it when they lose, and they're all over you when they win. The first time they won a game in a couple of years, I ran into 1 or 2 people that I knew from Tech, and every conversation with them, just like we end our start and end our conversations or end our conversations, go Dogs. Every conversation with them just was the score. They start just saying the score of the game, that they won the game. I don't remember what the score was for that Tech game that year, but they just tell you the score. Let's say they won 30-20, 30-20. 30-20, like, okay, yeah, thank you. All right, talk. Okay, we got to go. Thanks. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, 30-20. That's what you'd hear from the Tech guy, right? So, but literally, same people. You come back next year, you win the game. You guys just, it's all you think about football. You're a bunch of dumb meatheads. We're so smart. We're Tech people. You're all going to work for us anyway. We don't care about football. I mean, that's the worst, right? Own it. If you're going to own it, own it. You don't care? Don't care. That's fine. I understand. Everybody doesn't have to love football. You don't have to think your university's awesome because you're a great football team. But own it and live with it. Auburn fans are not that. Auburn fans own it. They'll live with it. And I know it pains them to have an 8-game losing streak against Georgia. I mean, Alabama is where everything starts and ends, right? I mean, I think a lot of Auburn fans could live with a 1-11 season as long as they beat Alabama. But a lot of Auburn fans, though, are definitely want, the second most important thing to them is to beat Georgia. And and again, I'm happy to have that opportunity. And I think this is why I want to take the time here to reflect on that and say, look, this is another opportunity to see what happens. I mean, it'll be painful if we lose. The Auburn fans will crow because they were not supposed to win this game and they haven't won a game in a long time. They'll feel like they're taking a big step in knocking us off the pedestal, right? If we lose this game to an unranked underdog Auburn team, although not that much of an underdog, and playing at home at night in front of a juice stadium, the questions will certainly come out, like, oh, is the dynasty over? Is Georgia done? What is Kirby Smart going to have to do to retool? Look, we'll go through all that if that's what happens. And I promise you, Auburn fans, I'm sorry, guys. Auburn fans will be overjoyed to be the team that gets to reflect that. Just like I can tell you, like, there's some great and memorable games in this Georgia-Auburn series. So one of the ones that I was really proud of is, Auburn is on a 20-game win streak coming into the 1994 game. They're on probation, so they can't play in a bowl game, and they're not going to win the national championship, but they're still kicking butt, and they're undefeated coming to the end of the season where they've got just Alabama and Georgia left on their schedule, Georgia first. And so Georgia was a huge underdog in that game, but manages to tie the game 23-all. So there were still ties in college football at this point. And so we take the game to a tie. And that was awesome because we ended their 20-game win streak. They still turned around and were like, hey, we still got a 21-game unbeaten streak, and that ended in the next game when Alabama beat them. So, but we got it first, right? We stopped the winning streak, and that was awesome. A couple of years before that, just before I came to school, there was the game that Mark Schlabach at ESPN put a big article out about this week. I had it on my notes, and he stole some of my thunder, so you can go read his article. The game known as the game between the hoses. Many of you might remember that, heard of that. But Georgia is a huge underdog, wins at Auburn, and some fans run out onto the field, and a few of them were trying to pull sod from they wanted to rip up parts of the Auburn logo from the field. All they had was their hands. They didn't bring gardening tools or anything. So it was a very unsuccessful effort. I mean, they were getting little scraps of painted grass. I mean, no big deal. But Auburn got all chippy about it, and they turned on the fire hoses, the big watering hoses, and they tried to get all the fans off the field, they said. But the incident reports from the whole thing, people will tell you, including, very like coaches' wives and the band, the Red Coat Marching Band, and people who were not on the field got drenched. So, maybe they say, oh, we're just trying to, protect the field, keep everybody safe, and get the people off the field. Well, it's freezing cold. It's in November, and somehow all the Georgia fans seem to have come out of that game wet. And Auburn did eventually apologize, but so that became known as the game between the hoses. So that was, a famous and fun game. I wrote down some others that I thought were worth talking about that I remember. The 1992 game was great. I was at that game, and I saw a video of that on one of the social media recently, the ending of the game. We were actually the favorite team. That was, again, we go 10-2 that year. And so we were ranked, and they weren't, but they had a chance to win the game. They were down at the goal line. I mean, it was like inches. I don't remember if it was third or fourth. I think it was third and goal and inches to go. And they snap the ball. There's a fumble. There's a lot of chaos. The ball's bouncing around. There's a pile up. They're having a hard time unpiling it. The officials probably screwed this up. They didn't do much to get it unpacked and get it back in getting playing. When they snapped the ball, it was about maybe 30 seconds of game time. This is also, by the way, I mean, as much as I love Pat Dye, and he is a former Georgia guy, so I'll give him a lot of respect, and he did great things at Auburn. This is seemingly a bad coaching move because they have no timeouts and they decide to run the ball. I think they just thought they were going to punch it in on that. They had all the confidence that we're just going to punch this in the end zone and the game will be over. But it didn't happen. They fumble the ball and there's a pile up and it's not clear where the ball is. And it takes so long to unpile it that the game clock, when the play is over, is like 23 seconds still on the clock, and the entire game clock expires without the officials ever setting the ball, and Georgia runs off the field to win. And Auburn fans for years whined and moaned and complained that Georgia cheated and that we laid down and we wouldn't get up and we wouldn't snap the ball. We have no responsibility for that, by the way, unless the officials put the ball on the ground and blow the whistle, and they didn't. And so it was up to the officials. And anyway, there was a lot of whining and complaining about that. 1996 game, you might remember, was the first ever overtime game in the history of the SEC, and it was brilliant. Went 4 overtimes, and Georgia prevailed 56-49. If you are watching on the video, I'm pointing to it right there. There's the picture, the famous picture of Uga taking a bite out of the Auburn wide receiver. That was happened at the beginning of that game. And so that's just a famous and exciting game for a lot of reasons. First overtime game in history, and this iconic Uga picture. And by the way, I didn't say this at the beginning of the podcast, but I am producing the video podcast now, so this should be available on video. Now, the first one from the one that I said was the Monday podcast, but actually didn't get published out into people getting it until Tuesday, so I apologize about that. It was recorded and available for Monday, but it didn't make it out. Anyway, that was the first ever video podcast that did go live. So we are on video now, and hopefully you'll be able to see this on YouTube. I don't know why YouTube, when it went to YouTube, it still only showed the audio with just the Daily Dawg logo, podcast logo up there. So I think you should be able to either just listen to it in audio or see the video. I will try to get that fixed. But you can go to thedailydawg.com, which is hosted by Substack, and you can see the video podcast from there, or just listen to it whichever way you want. But so that is the option, and I will tell you more options where you can see the video, especially on YouTube. Once I know for sure it's there, but you can check and see if it is there. All of our podcasts are on YouTube, but they were all audio only, and maybe it's having a hard time switching to showing the video because it was originally audio only. So anyway, a little side note there. You had the 2002 game, was a big game for Georgia. That was the one that was a night game, and Auburn was we were in vying for the chance to go to the SEC championship game and win our first SEC championship in 20 years, which we did end up doing. You might remember that was the Michael Johnson fourth down catch, and we won the game 24-21 with about 30 seconds to go in the game. You also had the other memorable games. I remember the 1997 game, which literally we had an off week after beating Florida for the first time. So we lost to Florida for like 7 games in a row. And you might remember we beat Florida 37-17. Robert Edwards had 4 touchdowns, and it was like, wow, maybe we're going to make something this season. Maybe we're ascending to championship level. We get the off week, and we come back the next week, and Auburn just runs all over us and wins 45-34 at home, and it just deflated the whole season. And that's an aspect, by the way, of what this series used to be like. And that is that Georgia and Auburn always used to play in November. And if either or both of them were contending for the SEC or national consideration, national title consideration, top rankings, then this game had a lot. I mean, both of these teams have taken away a lot of opportunities from each other, or they earned their opportunity by beating that other school, because you're playing one of your top rivals and another high-end SEC team, a team that's worthy of SEC and national championship consideration a lot of years, and you're playing them in the last or the second to last game of the year. So this, there used to be a lot, I think, and some people have pointed this out. Some of the articles I've seen this week have pointed out, it might have been I think it was a piece in the AJC that talking about maybe the rivalry has lost some of its juice. And one of the reasons they were theorizing it's lost some of its juice is the last 4 or 5 years, the games have been played in September and October instead of November. And it just doesn't have the same, you obviously have to play big games earlier in the season too, or you can, right? We certainly would have thought it was a big deal to have finally beaten Alabama recently if we'd won the game in September, and we'd carry that love of that all the way through the season. And maybe that will or won't change our season. Although, like we talked about last season, we lost in September to Alabama. Didn't affect the fact that we won the SEC championship, went to the playoffs. So a lot of times there's just a lot more emphasis put on that last or second to last game, because that often is the one that's going to determine exactly what happens there. So 2005, we lost to Auburn again. But and that's a shame, because that was a season we went to the SEC championship game. We beat LSU, kind of shocked them, and we were down in the teens. We were like LSU was number 3 in the country, and we were 13 coming in that game. In part because we just lost to Auburn 2 weeks before the end of the season, and that took a lot of the bite out of our possible season. Now, look, that season you're going to have 2 teams that are vying undefeated for national champion, and we already had a loss in there, even if we'd beaten Auburn. So I don't think you're thinking national championship, but and we did end up winning the SEC, went to SEC championship, beat LSU and won it. It's just we would have been even, we would have been a lot closer to that elite discussion. So maybe we didn't lose that much, but it was embarrassing. And that's something Auburn could look at and say, hey, they beat the SEC champion, didn't go to the SEC championship themselves. That game I also remember, by the way, because it was incredibly memorable. And I feel like there always used to be a ton of these memorable games, right? And you might remember this if you're old enough. The game came down to, it was a back and forth game. We couldn't stop them at all. They had this wide receiver, Romadushu, I can't remember. I can't say his name properly. I don't think I could say it if I was reading it. But he was great. I think he did go on to have a decent NFL career. And he has like 100 and something yard game in this game. And a lot of it comes right at the end, because we were not able, they also had a running back, Kenny Irons, and he had like 179 yards in the game, and he was killing us. So they were just running the ball up and down the field. But we do come all the way back. We'd been down and we'd come back, we'd get down, come back. We come all the way back, and with 3.5 minutes to go, we kick a field goal and we go up 30-28. And then we get Auburn at their own 32 or 34 yard line. We get them into a 4th and 11 play. So this is another one of these, like, all we got to do is stop 4th and 11, and it's like a minute and 20 seconds to go now or whatever. We just got to stop this, and we're going to take a knee and win this game. And it was a great, exciting game, and we're going on to the SEC championship, and maybe we got a chance to finish in the top 5 in the country. Maybe if somebody slips up, and everybody doesn't go undefeated, maybe we're part of that national title discussion. Didn't work out that way because you had 2 undefeated teams, but, you didn't know that at the time you're playing the Auburn game, right? So Romadushu Romanush, anyway, however you say his name, he catches what he ends up getting a 63-yard completion. I mean, he catches the ball right over the middle, just past the first down marker, and then instead of tackling him, he just runs and runs and runs all the way down almost to the goal line. 63 yards, okay, when you're trying to stop 4th and 11. And the only thing that would have been good about that is like, well, if they score quick, there's still a minute and a half to go here. Maybe we can get the ball back and we can try to win this thing, right? Because this is big. That's what kind of game this is. It's a shootout. And actually, Paul Oliver, the great Georgia defensive back from that team, punches the ball out just before he gets to the end zone. And it was a huge controversy in the sense that it took a lot of time on the replay to figure out what's going on. The ball rolls in the end zone. Georgia and Auburn people pile on it, and the ball ends up rolling out of bounds and seems to be recovered out of bounds. So the theory should have been, it felt like, that it would have been Georgia's ball as a touchback because the ball went into the end zone and then rolled out of bounds. But the officials ended up ruling that the ball could not be advanced from the point of the fumble. And so they didn't count anything about it going in the end zone. So they spotted the ball to Auburn on the 3-yard line. And Tuberville, I think, was still coach then. And he basically just ran, 3 plays going nowhere. They intended not to score. They just ran into the line and stopped so that they could eat the rest of the clock because he knew what everybody else knew, which is like whoever has the ball last, if they have any time at all in this game, is going to win. So they ran it down to 3 seconds to go, kicked the game-winning field goal, and we lost 31-30. And again, in the end, probably didn't cost us that much, but it was just painful. Just the whole experience was painful. And that, to me, is like how the Georgia-Auburn games went in the first 10 years until, again, we sort of flipped the script, although that was past that first 17 years. But it's just one of those amazing things. And then, of course, in the memorable Georgia-Auburn games, you also have the infamous blackout game. And that's your 2007 game. So 2006 is when we began the run we're on now, which is so the last 20 games starts in the 2006 season, and we've won 17 of the last 20 against Auburn. So I proudly every year, and I'm for the next podcast, maybe I'll change and you'll see me, I'll wear my blackout shirt. So I have a t-shirt from the blackout, says, Georgia blacked out Auburn. And this is a long sleeve black t-shirt. Georgia came out in the black jerseys and everybody was so excited. No Sean Marino, everybody dancing to Soulja Boy on the sideline. And, just the amazing electric night game atmosphere that turned out to be. And we just stomp Auburn 45-20, just kind of run away from them. It was a back and forth game for the first half, and then we run away. And it's just a great, memorable moment. We all love that. I got the t-shirt from the game, blacked out. And, it's awesome. I wear the t-shirt every year. And so I didn't have the t-shirt for the 2007 game because it happened in the 2007 game. So I've had it every year since the 2008 game. And of course, for every game I've worn it, we're 15-3 against Auburn every time I wear that shirt. So I don't know that it's just the shirt, but, a little factoid there. So I will be wearing the blackout t-shirt. Again, I wear it every year for this game. So again, this is what kind of rivalry it is, right? These are the kind of things you have to think about. So look, the rivalry's has lost a little bit of juice just because, what's happened on the field. Auburn has taken a step back over the last few years. When Georgia and Auburn first when I first became a part of that, like I said, they were very similar programs and they had a very similar history. I was arguing, and again, the whole history thing, learning the history of Georgia football, while we're losing those first 3 games, and my buddies got a lot to crow on and we're kind of getting our butts kicked, and then we're falling behind in the series, I was at least going back and say, hey, we've got 10, at that time we had 10 SEC championships and they had 4. So I'm like, hey, we got a lot more SEC championships than you. We have a few more wins than you, a slightly better winning percentage than you guys. Both teams had 2 Heisman trophies. And at that time, both teams Georgia actually was claiming 2 national championships, the 1942 and the 1980 national championship. And Auburn at that time, was just claiming the 1 championship from 1957. We hadn't gotten to the 2010 Cam Newton championship yet. And we hadn't gotten to this year where they decided they would just go pluck 7 more national championships out of the dustbin of history. And I'm sure you've heard about that, and I've talked about that some. And I think we're running a little long in today to dig into that much, although it seems like it would be a great thing to talk about in the history podcast or talking about the history of the Georgia Auburn series. But it is true that, what has sort of happened in the time frame, and I had this written down. So in the 37 years since I stepped foot on campus, in the first 17 years, going back to that time frame, this gives you a little reflection, and this leads us into talking about what is Auburn now and where are we going here with the in the future of the Georgia Auburn series, or for this game coming up and starting to break down this game. So in those first 17 seasons, Auburn won 137 games and Georgia won 138 games. They both lost. Auburn lost 63 games, Georgia lost 66. And they both won 2 SEC championships within those 17 years. So very even. But Auburn did have the better of Georgia in the series, 10-6-1 during that time. And so again, in my rivalry, we're falling behind. The teams are pretty close, and then it gets even worse when you get to the 2010 season. Auburn's going to win a national championship. So now I'm hearing all the crowing because my buddy and I are constantly sort of comparing. We're talking about the record since we both got there. He's got the better of me. We're talking about how the teams, historically are very similar, kind of similar position in the history books and the great programs of all time where they stand. And I'm always kind of making the argument, yeah, Georgia's a little bit better. Georgia's a little bit better. We got more SEC championships than you. We got a little better winning percentage than you. We got a few more wins than you. We've been in more bowl games than you. And but then Cam Newton comes along, and all of a sudden now they got 3 Heisman Trophy winners and they get a new shiny national championship. And we're still looking back at 19, and how long we kept looking back at 1980 and going, well, way back in 1980 we won the national championship. So, this really just becomes but then it's also sort of near the turning point, because at that same time, while they did win that one championship and they obviously won the game that year, that's already where we had begun turning it around. Like I said, the 17 out of 20 run that we're on now starts with the 2006 game, which was also a memorable game from my point of view. I don't know if you remember it. They I think Brandon Cox was their quarterback, and they were actually had national title aspirations. They came into that game, into the season, ranked number 5. Georgia was not a good team that year, and we were unranked in that 2006 game, and we just spanked them out of nowhere. We came up and we won that game 37-15. I remember going out to dinner, getting Italian food out at one of the local Italian restaurants with my family, and I was just buzzing. I just couldn't stop thinking about how happy I was that we had just kicked Auburn's butt. And then the next year would be the blackout game, and then the next year we'd win a close one, and then the next year we'd win another close one, and so all of a sudden we're on a 4 in a row. And that series, that gets you to 2009. That series is back to going into the 2009 game. The series was back to, and the whole, at that point, it's so in 2009 you're at the 113th meeting, and the total points scored by each team was 1 point off. Like, I think Georgia had scored 1 more point in 113 years of football playing Auburn than Auburn had scored against Georgia. That's just, again, amazing how close the series had been. It's a couple 100-point differential now in Georgia's favor as we pulled ahead. But an important reflection, what I was getting at is, so Georgia and Auburn have incredibly similar records in those first 17 years. But in the last 20 years, this 20 years that we've sort of pulled away from them in the series, Georgia has won 203 games and lost 58, or 777 winning percentage. We've won 3 SEC championships and 2 national titles. In that same time frame, Auburn has won 151 games and 98 losses, a 606 winning percentage. That's not bad, but it's below their historical average. They're historically somewhere between a 625 and a 650 winning percentage. They did win that national championship, and they still won another 2 SEC championships. But so we hadn't really pulled ahead. We've won 5 SEC championships since I stepped foot on campus, and Auburn's won 4 since then. So we haven't pulled ahead that much. We still had that. We had that 6, championship lead. Like I said, back in 1989, 10-4, and now it's 15-8. So, but it's those other ways where we've kind of just pulled ahead. And this 20 game, this 17 out of 20, Auburn has only been the higher ranked team 7 times in those 20 seasons. And then there was another 2 games where neither team was ranked. So I don't know how you sort that one out. And they split those games. So Auburn just hasn't been as good a team. And especially you look at the 8-game winning streak we're on right now. Georgia comes into each of those games ranked 6th, 5th, 4th, 2nd, 1, 5th. Okay, that's the rankings of the 8-game win streak we're on now. Auburn was 2nd, so the first of those games, Auburn was actually, that's one of those 6 games where Auburn was the higher ranked team, the 2017 game. And we won that one. Well, that's the SEC championship game. So we lost. That's the season we played them twice. So we came into the first game ranked number 1. They came in ranked number 10. They beat us, as you might remember, 40-17, which felt terrible. They crushed our undefeated season, put our hopes on jeopardy, but we still made it to the SEC championship game. And then we get the rematch against Auburn. And in the rematch, we beat them 28-7. Not as bad a beatdown, but pretty close, or pretty functionally close beatdown. And of course, that propels us into the playoff, and then we make it to the national championship game, and then 2nd and 26 happens. We've talked about that. So, so we get 2 cracks at Auburn that year. So that was the beginning of this current 8-game winning streak. Was the second game in 2017, and that second game we had fallen down from having been number 1 to number 6, and they ascended to number 2 after beating number 1 Georgia. Then Alabama, who was right behind us, went to number 1. They turned around and beat Alabama the next week. But then we get to face them as the number 2 team, in the SEC championship game. This time we beat them, and now we jump back up, and they just end up with a consolation prize. Nice season. You beat number 1 Georgia, you beat number 1 Alabama, and you got nothing to show for it. Actually, they're going to go on to play in the Sugar Bowl, I think, and lose to UCF. And as I've said before, one of the only things I would have been really happy to see Auburn do for the SEC and for everybody is have beaten that undefeated UCF team, so we wouldn't have to hear the stupid crap about UCF claiming to be the national champion and undefeated from that season. Just stupid. So Auburn could have done us all a favor, but no. They go and lose that game. So all they can do is crow about how they beat number 1 Georgia, number 1 Alabama in back-to-back games. And you get a door prize for that. So thank you. But yeah, so since then, Auburn, after being number 2 in that game, they come into the last 8 games ranked 24, 12. Then they get back up to 7, and we were 4 that year, but we still won the game 27-6. The next year we're number 2 and they're number 18. We won the game 34-10. And then the last 3 years we've been number 2, number 1, number 5, and they've been unranked. And so those games have been 42-10, 27-20, which that's the Brock Bowers save the day game. And then last year a very ho-hum 31-13 game. And one of the articles I think in the AJC this week pointed out, and I'd kind of forgotten this, that last year's ho-hum 31-13 game actually inspired Kirby Smart to call out the fans. And be like, hey guys, you need to bring the juice. And again, so I'm kind of bandwagoning that a little bit here in today's podcast and saying, yeah, look, don't lose sight of the fact that this is Auburn. This is a long-time heated rival. They have taken away SEC championships. They have laughed at us when they have beaten us. They have been happy to, I left out, talking about historical games, I left out the miracle on the play, or whatever they call it, the prayer at Jordan Hare, right? They come up with these little catchy names for all their big games. So the prayer at Jordan Hare, how terrible a game that was, where, they scored the game-winning touchdown after we'd come all the way back and had the lead, and Aaron Murray does a great job of getting us all the way back to in front. And again, we get them into 4th and 15 or something like that, and they just heave a ball down the middle that should have been picked off by either of 2 guys, but instead they bat it around like a volleyball. The Auburn wide receiver catches it, runs in the end zone, and then they're going to have the kick 6 against Alabama a week or 2 later, and it's miracle on the plains. And they'll of course go on to Gus Malzahn was coach. They'll go on to the national championship game, lose to Florida State, thankfully, so we don't have to hear about them winning another national championship. Imagine if the prayer at Jordan Hare and the kick 6 had resulted in them actually winning the national championship that year. I mean, even these last 8 games in a row, that's all they would still be reminding us about that season, if even with these 8 straight losses, if that had happened. So Thankfully, we don't have to do that. Um, so look, this has been a long dive into the history of the Georgia Auburn rivalry, and it makes a great contrast, like I said, to remember that I know we've won 17 out of 20. I know we've lost some of the juice because the games haven't been super competitive. But this game, and of course we're not the home fans this time, so I'm not asking the fans to rally and get all excited. I mean, yes, there'll be fans there, and I hope the Georgia fans are loud. But just remember that it'll be painful if we lose this game. I mean, not only will it cause questions and put us on the outside looking in the SEC and for the playoffs, but it'll also come with Auburn being really, really happy that they were the people that did it. And, if that same thing, I mean, if we were playing a mid-season game for some reason at a conference against Wisconsin and they won the game and you're not going to hear a lot of crowing from Wisconsin about, hey, we knocked Georgia out of the playoff. If we fail to make the playoff because we lose this game, I promise you, whatever happens in Auburn season, they will gleefully remind you about this. So that is rivals. They're close to you. You have to live with it 365 days a year. You have to live with them all the time after these big moments. So look, don't lose sight of that. This is a big rivalry game. Yes, if we win this game, we'll be 10 games up in the history of the series, and that's great. And look, you might as well stockpile all the wins you can, because while the series was close and tied, this isn't the first time. We had a 9-game winning streak back in like the 20s or something like that. I could go back and find it real quick. Let me see. I'll tell you. We had a 9-game winning streak, yes, from 1923 to 1931. So this, if we win, we go up 10 games overall, 10 games over 500 in the series. We'd be 66 and 60, 56 and 8 ties in the series. That would seem like a commanding lead, but I'm just pointing out, look, we had in the 20s into the early 1930s, we had a 9-game winning streak then, and still, by the time you get to when I'm a freshman, this is basically a tied series, right? So these things ebb and flow, and you need to bank. History lasts forever. All 130 of these games are going to be recorded on paper, and you see who they are and where they are. So yeah, it might just be the 9th win in a row, and it might just put us where it feels like Auburn doesn't have much of a chance. And but I promise you, they will come back. There will be a time, sometime, hopefully a long time from now, but there'll be some time, maybe when I'm no longer around to be a Georgia fan, I could live with that. But there'll be a time where they get back on a 3, 4, 5-game win streak. They'll win 5 out of 7, or 7 out of 10, or 7 out of 8, or something like that, and they'll start fighting back. It's going to happen. So, let's bank the wins while we can. Let's take all the bragging rights we can, and let's remember, this is one of the great fun things about college football. This is what makes it fun. We don't just need to look at these games mechanically and go out there and say, are we winning the playoff? Are we winning the national championship within and every game? That doesn't have to be the judge. This is an opportunity to say, look, we lost Alabama this year. We've already beaten Tennessee. We can beat Auburn. We can beat Florida. We can beat Georgia Tech. Last year, let's not lose sight of that. Last year, we beat, we lost Alabama and we lost Ole Miss. A lot of people what I'm trying to say is very few Bulldogs, I think, are going to point to either of those and say those are our most hated rivals. How do we do against our hated rivals? Well, we started the year by beating Clemson, longtime hated rival. We don't get to play as much anymore. We beat Georgia Tech in the epic 8 overtime thriller. We beat Auburn last year in a game that people thought was sort of a ho-hum, not super impressive, but the final score, 31-13, looks good, pretty significant win. We beat Florida last year as well. Yeah, we were behind at the half, and then we had to storm back to take the lead, but we won that game by a couple scores. So, on the whole, and we won the SEC championship, and we beat down Texas. Texas, the upstart new team in the SEC. They come in. What do? We beat them twice in the same season. Beat them at home at their place. Welcome to the SEC, and and then we turn around and we beat them in the SEC championship game. So, that was good. We don't have a huge rival there with Texas, but it's nice to put a couple wins down and just say, hey, this is our conference. You're not just come in here first year, think you're going to walk away with this. So I think that, that's not a big rivalry moment, but it was still a big moment. So we won the SEC championship. We go to the playoffs. We won 11 games. We finish in the top 10. And we go basically undefeated against our biggest longtime classic rivals. That's another great season. When I was those first 10, 17, 20 years that I was a Georgia fan, that was the best I could hope for some years, was if we could go undefeated. Usually if we went undefeated against those rivals, that meant we were going to beat a highly ranked Florida or Tennessee team, and it would have put us in line for the national championship. But even 3-1 out of 4 top rivals and a top 10, top 15 finish, that was a great season. It's a lot of fun. You had a good time. You enjoyed it. So let's get ready to enjoy this game as fans. I hope we win. I feel pretty good about it. We're going to get into the breakdown in the next podcast and what I actually think is going to happen. It's interesting that the game is so close. Auburn has showed some grit and fight and guts, and I think people have a pretty good feeling about Auburn, and this game looks a little scary on paper heading into it because, we just haven't been very dominant. They've been close on a couple big games against teams that have looked really good so far. So the feeling is this is a close, tight game. But I think there's more to look at, and we'll do the same thing we always do. We'll do the matchups. We'll look at the true outcomes. We'll look at the possibilities, and then we'll make our predictions and say where do we think we're going to come out on this. But my first instinct is I feel pretty good about it, and maybe that is history speaking. Maybe that's the fact that, like, hey, we've played better Auburn teams than this recently, and they haven't been able to win. I don't know, but I think that there's, so maybe history is speaking. Maybe I've just gotten used to it, but I think that we'll break. Like I said, we'll break it down. We're going to go ahead and call it here. I appreciate you being a part of the podcast today. Please remember to check out the video podcast. You get to see me sitting here talking to you, which I guess is more exciting than not because people seem to like video podcasts. So that's why we're moving in that direction. Please tell your friends. You can find all the things about us at thedailydawg.com. Easiest thing to remember. You can find the podcast there. You can find everything. Of course, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. So wherever you find us, leave comments, share thoughts. Love to share them. I'd love to read thoughts from folks online. During game time, I usually do run a chat from Substack on the chats. All you have to do is be a subscriber, which at the moment is free. So if you're a subscriber, you can join the chat, and it'd be great to have a community of us sitting there talking about how things are going in the Auburn game. So please join us if you can for that. All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to being back with our breakdown and game prediction in the next podcast. Have a great day, and go Dogs.